So following my last video about the decks that most surprised me in 2024, I thought I would follow up with a video about the decks that I most want to work with in 2025. So I have a few decks that I have on order through Kickstarter, but not very many. And the last few announcements from places like Llewellyn and US Games did not necessarily have any decks that were calling my name. That could all change in a moment, in a heartbeat, in a fraction of a second. But right now, I'm feeling like I have so many decks that I didn't get to spend any time with in 2024 that I would really like to lean into in 2025. And the first deck on this list is the Every Little Thing You Do Is Magic, which I did a review for, and we'll try to remember to put a link in the cards for my review, walkthrough, whatever you want to call it. But this was a deck that I bought on a whim. It is published by Clarkson Potter, so it's not one of the sort of big three tarot and oracle producers. But when I got this deck, I mean, I just, I saw it on Amazon and I was like, what the heck? It is this absolutely fantastic sort of illustration combined with photo collage, and the artwork totally works for me. I was surprised. It's probably one of the more contemporary looking, I think, decks in my collection in terms of just being sort of a very modern art aesthetic. It's just so fun. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I'm discovering that the decks that seem to speak to me most focus more on animals than people. And this deck is no exception. I honestly do not think there are any people in this deck. There may be one or two, but I mean, even this world card where normally you'd have the figure in the middle, this one has a doorway and then the creatures around it. So yeah, I think I now know like what my sweet spot is, or what my, like, how to get me to buy a deck. Don't put any people in it. I mean, there's hands, but I feel like that's a pretty, like, doesn't have to be specific. But I just, there's some signs of humanity in terms of like buildings and things like that. But really, it's focused on the animals, and I just love it. Would I have smaller borders and less gewgaws around the edge? Yes. But under the circumstances, I'm fine. Oh, if they did a borderless edition, I'd be such a happy camper. But this is fun. I like it. I have thought about trimming it a little bit because there is enough room that I could take off a little bit of these edges, because these cards are as big as, pretty much the same size as a Hay House Oracle deck. So they're good sized cards. I could probably actually pull one if I wanted to check, but you guys get the idea. So this is definitely a deck I would like to use more. So I suspect it will be one of my monthly tarot draw decks for 2025. I'm not sure which month. I will probably have to sort of think through if I want, like, for, planning for like January, do I specifically want a deck that feels outdoorsy, cold, a little more, I don't even know what the words are, like dealing with like internalizing, like being in the house, being cozy, that kind of thing. I don't know. So, and the next deck that I would like to spend some time with is the Steampunk Fairy Tarot, which I bought this in 2024, but have not actually used. I've, I think, given it a shuffle and flipped through it a couple times, but this has such a lovely art style. The art was done by Ashley Cassidy, and the book was written by Pamela Chen. But this is just such a fun, fun art style, fun aesthetic. I was surprised because I didn't think that I would necessarily be into a steampunk or a fairy deck, but I guess if you put steampunk fairies in a deck, then it's okay. But it's just, again, a very fantastical world, a very playful world. This deck does have a lot of people in it, but what has been lovely about this is that the people are not, they're different. You know, this very much feels like Little Red Riding Hood, but also like, you know, the figures are different colors and different sizes. Some are green, some are, you know, white, some are other colors. Like, I just like, so that it doesn't feel like it's necessarily representing someone in just one aesthetic. Like, this guy's all green, you know, and the lover. So it just gives a different feel. So I really like it. Isn't she fantastic? Genius. I love her. Love her. So yeah, so I just like that there's diversity and, you know, just a nice variety of characters. It feels like another world, but also like we can relate to it in our world. So I'm excited to give this a whirl. I saw one of the presentations that Pamela Chen did for the Llewellyn, what is it called? Llewellyn Fest or whatever that they do in like June or July, and was like, oh, I really like her. I want to follow her and you know, support what she's doing because I think she's really interesting. So another deck that I really want to dive into in 2025 is the Good Fortune Tarot, which is, everybody's been talking about it. It is Jessica Rue who did the Woodland Wardens Oracle artwork, and Barbara Moore, who is, well, Barbara Moore. So, you know, she has touched so many parts of the tarot world, and this is, like, initially I wasn't sure I was going to like the artwork again, and I think this has to do with my reaction to people on my cards and sort of coming to an understanding about that, but the illustrations are lovely, and Jessica Rue's artwork, again, has such a wonderful storybook quality. It is so fantastic and beautiful, and look at him with his little mouse buddy on his shoulder. So it's just a great, there's a lot of storytelling in this deck, as well as a lot of the images that are familiar to many in tarot, but just creates a real different perspective, and I'm looking forward to diving into it more. I think it will be a really great deck to work with. So yeah, it looks like it's mostly still in order. Like, I have not really played around with this at all. So yeah, so I'm excited to get the chance to work with this. I was, like, again, trying to figure out, like, when will I work with it? Is this a deck that I want to work with at the beginning of the year or more into the spring? But I think it's so storybooky that I feel like I could probably use it pretty early on in the year. So maybe this might be my January deck. I don't know. So the Good Fortune Tarot is one of the other decks that I want to work with. And I think maybe going through this process and seeing what decks I have that I want to work with more will keep me from doing the endless scrolling for finding a new deck, a new inspiration kind of thing. So another deck that I really wanted to work with this year but didn't get around to it, so it has now been moved to the 2025 category, is the Tarot Landscapes. And this was another deck that I'd seen people talking about it, but wasn't sure, as much as I thought the artwork was pretty, I wasn't sure if it was something that I was going to be able to read with any kind of accuracy. It is published by a company called Vivida. So it's not, again, not one of the big three, but this deck is so pretty, and well, it's got a bit of a wobble already. So not the best cardstock, but the artwork is just stunning and really, I guess, I feel like working with this deck is definitely going to get me thinking about the environmental impact that humans put on the world, because again, this is a case where it is all nature. There are no real people in here. There's a couple that I think feel like you can see, again, in this one, you can see the city in the background. I I feel like this is like Nature Finds a Way. But yeah, and like this one, you can see there's a spider here, and you've got these big, tall structures. So I'm definitely interested. I've looked at the guidebook a couple of times, and it feels like a good, like it's telling good stories. It was edited by Francesca Mattioni, and the illustrations are by Yoshimari. So sorry if I didn't say that earlier. They're not lengthy, but I do feel like there's some good details in here. So I'm excited to sort of dive into this one. This is another one that, because it's landscapes and crosses everything from very polar feeling to very, summery feel, kind of thing. I think I could use it at any point during the year. So I'm looking forward to experimenting with this. And again, I feel like this is like learning my lesson, like animal decks and nature decks are very much calling to me. And maybe that'll change over the course of the year, but definitely something that I'm noting. I will have to say, tarot landscapes, why 2 boxes? I don't understand. I mean, I guess the assumption is that at some point you don't need the guidebook, but because the cards fit into this like inner flappy box, but the guidebook sits in, like, so you have the cards in here and then the guidebook behind it, and then it all went into the 2-part box. It's just a lot of packaging, unnecessary. I think it would have been fine without it. Okay, I have a few more decks to go over. This deck I used a little bit in 2024, but I would like to spend more time with it. It is the Talisman Oracle. I taught a class at the San Francisco Pen Show on sigils, and this ended up being a really good place to sort of talk about that type of symbolism. They call it the Talisman Oracle, but as you read through the guidebook, it's very much sigils as much as talismans. It's, like splitting hairs with the wording, but it's a fun deck to use. I've really enjoyed it, and I know that some people have commented that the sigils, the talisman, are very, very small on the card, and the focus is more on the keyword and the image, so if it's a figure or whatever. But I'm okay with that, because I think it helps to start making those mental connections. And I found it a very uplifting deck. Most of the, like, it's not, if you're looking to do shadow work, I'm not entirely sure that this would be the Oracle deck that you would want to combine with it. It is much more an uplifting, protective kind of thing. So I do have a little trouble with the wording here. And could it not have been gratitude or something else? I don't know. But I always think of, like, it's very much a bless your heart, Southern backhanded insult to be like, blessed day. Like, I think you actually mean, I hope you don't get kicked in the ass today. But it's just me. Like, I grew up in the South, and people would say, bless her heart, which is just shorthand for that woman is nuts, or she doesn't know what she's talking about. So that one card is probably my only, like, I have a bit of a bone to pick with that one. But everything else, like, I've really enjoyed this deck. I used it quite a bit. The cardstock is ridiculously shiny and slippery, which is kind of a drag. This is a case where just a lovely matte cardstock would have been fine. Like, and I know that part of it is these images are pretty dark, with the dark background, and then these, sort of tone on tone artwork. So they probably went with the glossy paper to make sure that all the ink stood up and didn't turn into mush. But dang, they're slippery. It's not a huge deck, but I found it super useful. I really like it. I like the card backs. I think they're really cool. It does come with, like, pieces of paper that you can sort of, like, redraw the talismans yourself. The guidebook has the little talismans printed larger, so you can kind of see, because they're often really, really tiny. So you can get a better feeling. And then it talks about in reading, and it includes talisman power with, like, a little key phrase. So I really like this deck, and it doesn't get talked about very much, but I do think it's quite useful. if you can get past the super slippery paper. Okay, so I have one more Oracle deck to talk about and then a couple other things, and then we'll be done. So the last Oracle deck I wanted to talk about that I'd like to work with more in 2025, or work with it all, I haven't really worked with it yet, is the Tree Keeper's Oracle, which was an Angie Sullins deck, and the artwork is by Stephanie Law. And I don't know why it took me so long to figure this out, but when someone finally mentioned in a walkthrough or video or whatever that Stephanie Law was the artist who did the Shadowscapes tarot, I was like, oh, well, yeah, of course I have to get this. I love the Shadowscapes and was like, okay, let's do it. Because initially I was thinking that it might be too, Fairy in the Woods for me. And not that there's anything wrong with Fairy in the Woods. And the fact that I absolutely love Shadowscapes. And I also love all of Paulina Faye's decks. Like, apparently I do have a love for fairies in the woods, and so I should get off my fussy butt and just appreciate these. So each of the cards has a keeper of some quality, and the artwork you could literally just fall into. Again, it's very storybook, like a wonderful picture book, fantasy book, and this is another case where the cardstock is super, super slippery. I'm wondering if it's the same crazy US Games cardstock. Is this a US Games? Yep. I think it's the same as the Talisman Oracle. They're like super glossy. They slide around a lot. I would just love it if they weren't quite, like, they don't even have to be matte, but like a semi-gloss. That would just, more, like, even comparing it to the Steampunk, which is still glossy, but like it's not as slippery. I mean, these feel like they're covered in wax or something. They just slide around so much. But I'm sure that it was done to bring out as much of the detail of these cards as possible. They are absolutely lovely, and I feel like sometime this spring I will be ready to get in touch with my inner fae, inner fairy vibe and dive into these. It's such a beautiful deck, and like I said, I love the Shadowscapes tarot, so why wouldn't I be just as engaged with this? So definitely worth an exploration. This is the Tree Keeper's Tarot, or Tree Keeper's Oracle by Angie Sullins, and artwork with Stephanie Law. So the last thing I want to talk about is the other thing that I want to spend more time with in 2025, which is learning Lenormand. And so these are the only Lenormand decks I have. And I realize that this is the weirdest collection of Lenormand decks that anyone could probably own. But I purchased the Yuletide Tales Lenormand by Faina Laura this time last year, and used it a little bit through December because it was one of the few decks that really tapped into the holiday for me in a way that I was like, I tried to pick up some of the other sort of holiday decks, and I wasn't really grooving with them. This is pretty good. I mean, it includes the keyword. That's what I'm trying to say. So in the case like this one, where it's not clearly evident that it's a heart, but it's this little bunny rabbit with the holly, you do have your keyword, so it's not a huge jump to figure out what these are. Most of them are pretty easy, like the star. I like the little Scully bouquet, the house, the fox, the mouse king. It's great. Tree, snake. It's a bit of a leap, but not terribly. Paths. I like the little North Pole sign. So it's a really fun deck. Scythe is a little hard to interpret, but they have no heads, so maybe it's easier than you think. The anchor is a little odd, but I'm okay with it. Like, it's just fun. It's a fun way to do this. These are great. Like, I love the size. It is your sort of classic Lenormand size. The cards are that rose petal, what they call rose petal finish, but it's a soft touch. coating is what it really is. Soft touch aqueous coating. Or laminate. This is probably more laminate, it feels like. But anyway, yeah, so it's a really cute little deck, and I will probably use it this holiday just to get me going on Lenormand. But this is the deck that I will probably be practicing with most this year. It is the Romantic Lenormand. I think it had 2 different owl cards. You could pick which one you wanted. The artwork is Anna Oginski. This is a low Scarabeo, and this was they're big oracle size cards, which is a little weird for Lenormand, since most people want smaller cards to do like the bigger grand tableau kind of layout. But since I'm using this more to study and learn, I figured it wasn't that big a deal. I absolutely love the images on here and the artwork. And while it says it's the Romantic, it is really has more of an Art Nouveau vibe. It's not like not every image has like a sort of romance or, sort of sexual connotation or anything. It's more, these are definitely more just like sort of a beautiful illustration style and very much remind me of an Art Nouveau, particularly with the borders and everything. It includes the symbols, the number. I found that it was pretty quick for me to get just by glancing at it, what each of the cards was supposed to be. There's your rider, clover. So it's a really lovely deck. Would I love it if they came out with a mini version? Yes. But for now, I'm going to use this as sort of my learning deck. If anyone has any recommendations for a really good Lenormand deck, please let me know, because I really would like to. Oh, I did actually get another Lenormand that I might work with that's a smaller card size. Maybe I'll do a more of an in-depth on Lenormand when I get a little bit of practice. Is anybody else doing Lenormand? I'm curious to learn more about it. And if you have book recommendations or anything, that would be great. But anyway, so I have a handful of decks, like tarot decks that I would like to work with more in 2025. A few oracle decks that I'd like to spend more time with, and work on Lenormand practice. So those are my plans going into 2025. Have you guys sort of started planning what you want to do for 2025? I know it's probably hard to think about that with it still being December and all, but for me, I think it helps to sort of start planning and start having a goal for what I want to do in the coming year, so that I don't feel, just like when January 1 rolls around and everybody asks, like, what's your, goals for the year? What, I don't even know what they call them anymore. Do you know what I'm talking about? The resolutions. Like, what are your resolutions? This is at least giving me my personal resolutions, which is to work with more of the tarot decks and oracle decks that I have, as well as start to build a Lenormand practice, which is something that I have really been interested in but have not dove into in any way. Also, if you can recommend any Lenormand books that I could reference, that would be great as well. So anyway, this is sort of where I am, being somewhat optimistic about moving into 2025 and keeping up my tarot and oracle and Lenormand practice. Let me know in the comments if you have plans for 2025. Maybe we can come up with like a study group or something for some of this. So thanks so much for watching, and do all the things that make YouTube happy. Click the bell, all that kind of stuff. You can't see me, I'm waving my hands around. Click the bell. Subscribe, like, leave a comment. Thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.